We talked about a lot of very important stuff relevant to, once again, the establishment of the whole situation and how we're going to work together with that client to establish that relationship in a way that we can form that empathy bond via focusing on the way we need to look at this from a counselor's perspective. And again, sometimes that counselor perspective does feel different from a best friend perspective, or a parent's perspective, or a teacher's perspective, or something like that. How do we look at that and understand what's going on with that and that motivation? I want to hear some wow points. There were, I hope, everybody should have. We covered a lot of stuff on Tuesday. Let me hear some wow points from Tuesday. Yes.
Well, mine's kind of a question that I'm going to roll into a wow point. So we can't or shouldn't, don't do that, ask people how does that make you feel. So how do you get a gauge of what people are feeling? What's the approach? What are your feelings on that?
Yeah. In other words, I would ask it first of all. Yeah. Instead of how does that make you feel, and the reason why I say don't say it that way is because with that ABC thing, the message is going to be it doesn't make you feel, and so we can't tell them that and then ask how does that make you feel.
Sure.
What are your feelings in response to that situation? How does that feel for you when you think about this? And then I would also combine, remember, what I also said was instead of focus necessarily on the feelings, how about let's focus on how are they giving meaning to this? In what way is this person thinking about this situation? Whatever it is that's bothering, whatever the situation is, how are they thinking about this situation in a way that is resulting in, remember, now I can say that because the message, the ABC message is that A isn't making you feel something. A results in you think about it, which results in how you feel. And so I could ask, how about this? Again, from that focus point, what are you thinking about this? What does this mean to you? When that happens, when that doesn't happen, when he, she, they do, don't do, or whatever the situation is, what are you thinking about that? How do you give meaning to that? And how does that result in, do you think right now, the way you're feeling? You see what does that make sense?
Yeah, because I would say, you do need to figure out what they're feeling, right?
Certainly, absolutely. And that ABC thing that we looked at Tuesday, yes, the feelings, because the basic thing is this. It goes like this. Yeah, the feelings are very important. A, B, C. And the next step from feelings is that we do something. Whether it's say something, do something, this or whatever else. And how effectively our next response is. How effectively what we do contributes to a solution versus making the problem even worse or whatever. Or feeling even worse. Or whatever is going to depend on how we're feeling. Yeah, emotions are very powerful, that kind of a thing. And if we're telling ourselves things that, instead of what's the real situation here, what is the real meaning here, how do I look at this from a centered, rational perspective versus I've got to throw a bunch of stuff into this, how do I make this to protect whatever else like that, then yeah, that's going to result in the kinds of feelings that are probably going to result in the kinds of things to do that aren't going to be that helpful in the long run. And so, yeah, the feelings are very important. And yes, we're going to get in touch with those feelings. As a matter of fact, one of the very important things we're going to do, and this is a real big challenge, is as we unfold that whole ABC thing, is help that client understand the difference between thoughts and feelings so that they can themselves become in touch with those feelings. So they're very important, but like I said, I'm going to focus more first. What are you thinking? How you're thinking? Probably, because it's just the way we are as humans. How is the way you're thinking probably making this feel a lot worse than it needs to? Not what happened, but the way you're thinking. I'm going to use think to feel connected kinds of language.
Okay.
And then again, how that person is thinking, how they're trying to develop a way to explain to themselves why this might be happening this way. how they're trying to develop a way that this is happening or that happened. And that is, of course, and if that is, well, this is happening, A is happening, well, let me see, because this bad thing, this unfair thing, this mean thing, this bad thing, or something like that, that's going to interfere with that person's ability, number one, to think what is the real situation. That's where, what is this meaning to you? How come, what is this meaning to you? And then how is that leading to, resulting in your feelings? Sure, very, very important. That's focusing on those feelings, because don't forget, those feelings, they become the use cue associations. Those feelings become meshed, and everything that we talked about on Tuesday, it's wrapped around those feelings. And clients very often do, ask them a feeling question, and I feel like this is unfair. Well, that's not really a feeling statement, that's a thought statement. How does this feel to you? And again, now how does this make you feel? How does this feel to you? Well, I feel like this, that, he, she, they, them, whatever it is acting in a way to be against me. I feel like this happened because it's just unfair. I feel like this. And first of all, those aren't feeling statements anyway. Those are thought statements. And then what we want, and so we're going to want that client to be able to understand the difference between thoughts and feelings. In a way that once they can start to separate those apart, they can start to see then the very important relationship between thoughts and feelings. They can start to see it's how they're thinking about it that is. And gang, whatever A is, and life can suck, can't it? Life can be a real bitch sometimes. But whatever it is, and one of the central themes of RET, this cognitive therapy, is that no matter how bad it is to start with, and sometimes it's not even bad anyway. Remember, we talked about A makers. However bad it is to start with in the first place, why make it even worse by the way we think about it?
So how do you get a client to go from that? Let's see, so you have a client, that's probably going to be my answer. You got a client that don't see the wrongs. How do you get them to understand that it is? I mean,
and again, that is, as we go into this, and the way that we're going to unfold how we do that cognitive therapy. One of the first ways, again, that we do any of these things, when you guys ask those very good how do you questions, and we are going to answer them. And the first step to answering those questions is understand why they may be. What are the dynamics? What are the things about how that brain works? And about all the other stuff that we've talked about. How do those things come together within each unique individual in a way that they learn how to think that way? We have to help them. We're going to help them. First of all, get in touch with this. Educating the client on this is a very, very important thing in the first place. We've got to get them understanding this. We've got to get them understanding the difference between thoughts and feelings. We've got to get them to understand. Another big thing is the difference between facts and problems. What have I said before? The fact is the client can't stand the fact that they can't change the facts. That client, that's another thing about the thinking, instead of thinking about what's the situation, how do I go from here, they're focusing on and then ruminating about the fact. We can't change facts, we can solve problems. And in just a bunch of different ways, we help this client slowly learn a different way to think about that stuff. In a way that, again, no matter how bad it is, and Albert Ellis, as a matter of fact, the father of RET, and I don't practice Albert Ellis RET. Albert Ellis would deny the reality of awful. To him, awful is the stupidest, dumbest thing a person can possibly say. I don't do that. The fact is that sometimes even awful happens. But even if it's awful, why make it even worse by the way we think about it? No matter what it is, why make it even worse by the way we think about it?
Why would he say there's no such thing as awful?
Pardon me?
Why would he say there's no such thing?
Because all that does is set you up to feel so damn mad.
Oh.
And it's irrational and it's pointless. Yeah, Albert Ellis, and you guys are going to meet Ellis. next semester. You're gonna meet Ellis, Carl Rogers, not in person, of course, but, I'm gonna fly him in here. But the fact is that, that anything like that, all you're doing is setting yourself up. And you know what? We can't hide from reality either, but we learn how to think about that different. Everything we talked about last time was about basically that, you guys. And remember something, in the bottom line of this, we really can't. First of all, feelings happen. It's a natural part of the way the brain works. Feelings happen. What is out there happening, we can't do much about that either, can we? Not as counselors, and we as individuals can't do much about what's happening out there. What we can do is come to grips with how we're thinking about things and whether or not the way we think about those things are contributing to solution or even more problems. And of course, for our clients, when they take those things and think them into that tiger, well then there becomes the next best reason to get loaded, to get high. Because that old brain, once it thinks there's a tiger here, once that brain's convinced there's a tiger there, that's it. That brain doesn't know the difference between a real good old-fashioned, in the old days, true danger tiger attack, and a modern, it doesn't know the difference. And if you take a modern, whatever it may be, situation, and by the way you think about it, you make it so bad and so helpless and so, there's nothing I can do about, and they're out to get me, this and that and everything else, and you turn it into that. That old brain hears that, it's going to finally, okay, I got it, I hear it. There's that tiger. Let's kick in fight or flight. But don't forget, when fight or flight kicks in, thinking shuts down. And then we don't care about the problem anymore. All we care about is defeating this tiger attack. Does that make sense? And that's why we often do then, instead of things that are going to help find solution, lend themselves to solution, we end up doing things, escape avoidance, those kinds of things like that, that instead of finding solution just exacerbate the problem, make it worse one way or another. And for our clients especially. And now, instead of having solved that problem, they're explaining to their counselor or their probation officer the next morning how come they got alcohol in their breath or something like that. Does that make sense? That. Okay, good. Good questions, you guys. Fantastic. Well, I want to hear more. Wow points. Question. Thoughts from Tuesday. What a day we had Tuesday. Yes.
My thoughts were on that whole ABC concept, and once you said it, it made sense that we don't really think about things before we associate it with feel. So then I tried to apply it in my life and think about and reflect on things that had happened that I didn't think through. I automatically acted on emotion. And then I found myself okay, I have a really close friend that I always say to her, don't make the decision right now because you're so emotional. Give it some time and then make a decision. You don't want to make any big decisions while you're emotional. So then I brought it back to the ABC concept. And if we are really sometimes doing that the right way, but oftentimes we do it the wrong way, but it's because that's the way we've been trained to do things. So if we can rationally look at this model and stop ourselves and think about how this action is affecting us and then respond. So I don't know. I like the whole part of that lecture. It was interesting.
And one thing about this, when you first present this to a client, it could feel to that client bad. Offensive. Why? Because it feels like you're blaming them for something. This isn't about blame at all. It's about getting in touch with reality. Basically, what it is how that brain works, you guys. Yeah, clients in the beginning. You have to get this client to understand this in a way that it doesn't feel scary to them, offensive to them. You've got to get this client to feed into this and invest into this. You've got to. And so what we're going to be seeing when we actually get into this next semester, that before we even start ABC counseling, we got some training to do for that client. They've got to understand what this is in a way that it really will work for them. We've got to help this client deal with some very important, including again, that basic task of just knowing the difference between thoughts and feelings. They're different. And we often use what, as I said Tuesday, we use feeling language to talk about thoughts, we use thought language to talk about feelings, and then that just confuses this whole thing. That's why this person is feeling so bad. That's why. And again, gang, do you see how all that stuff is going to roll together in a way that at some point that person's feeling so helpless, and then, gang, desperate. And once we start to feel that, well, you want to talk about that frontal lobe stop sign starting to get pretty wobbly now, and then we will start to do what? Hey, don't worry, I'm here for you. Let's kick in fight or flight. But you see what I'm saying with that? Don't forget, when fight or flight kicks in, thinking shuts down. We don't care about the problem anymore. All we care about now is what? Deal with this perceived tiger attack. Yes, back here.
When we talked about this on Tuesday, I was thinking about it, because when I did RDAP, we went through something like this. My thoughts were always irrational. I always thought like when it was time to fight, somebody made me do it instead of thinking about, my choices. But we had a thing called RSA, which is the Rational Self-Analysis.
Yes, yes.
And it was ABC too, but it's called Activating Events, Beliefs, and Your Consequences.
That's
Basically
basically what that is. You're exactly right.
And I went through some of my journals and just was familiarizing myself with it again, and it fits perfectly with your model.
And gang, and the first step to help that client with this, those of you who ask me, well, then what do you do about it? And the first step to do about it is what we're doing in class right now, whether it's what we were talking about Tuesday, which was more of the assessment stuff, or what we're going to do today, the brain stuff. One of the most important things we can do is understand ourselves, these dynamics in a way that, because bottom line is we are just human also. We put our little counselor hat on. That doesn't make us more than other humans. And guess what? We have an old brain too. And then when we start to get so frustrated, why? Because we don't understand why this client is being that way. We don't understand why they seem to be not listening to what we want to tell them. They don't seem to this. They don't seem to that. What did we say last time? That I don't care thing and stuff like that. And enough of that. And if we're not careful, and especially if we don't understand how come this is happening that way for that person, from that counselor perspective, then we're mad. And once we're mad, then our fight or flight, then we don't give a damn about trying to help that client anymore. We give a damn about winning that battle. I'll show you who's in charge. That kind of a thing like that. And that doesn't help that client one bit. And so, and another thing is once you teach this model, you got to kind of follow it yourself as a model for that model. If you teach that client that model and then all of a sudden you're all pissed off at that client, that kind of says, well, I told you to do it that way, but I'm not doing it that way. I'm all mad at you for probably irrational reasons. Do you see what I'm saying? So yes, fantastic. In a nice way. Yeah, it's the same basic thing. And it sounds to me like it was very helpful for you.
It was.
See? Yes.
It changed my life and just the way I dealt with it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yes, Wild Point.
So mine again is with the ABC. Does it have something to do, or a lot to do, with DBT?
With who?
With dialectal.
Yeah, same thing. And you know what? They've got about 30 acronyms for the same thing.
And that's one of the things, like when I went through all the training, I don't understand how you go from once you're in irrational mind, being able to get out of irrational mind or emotional mind, as I call it, and get back over into.
Let's look at it this way. Remember, we talked about learning theory. Remember, when we talked about learning theory, classical conditioning, some of those things out there that so instantaneously result in the way we're thinking about things. Memory, just one stimulus, just one little thing, and all of a sudden we're back to that. Hey, all it takes is one little thing, and we're back to a number one or a number two. Classical conditioning. And then we talked about, again, operant conditioning. And remember, that's where the consequences played a role. Gang, how we think, how we remember, our emotional response to that stuff, any of that stuff is as liable to classical and operant conditioning as anything else. And if I can learn, how about this? I feel as if I'm not accomplishing something. I demand I must because that's going to define me. And if I'm not accomplishing that, that's awful, terrible. So, and well, let me see now. I got to think about this. That's so unfair. I got to think, whose fault could this be? Who's doing this to me? And if I can figure that out, and then via that kind of thinking, then it doesn't help me get where I want to be, but at least I don't have to feel bad about it. What did we call that when we make feel bad go away? Negative reinforcement. Gang, how this person is thinking right now is not a disease they have. It's not necessarily an affliction. This is just a very well learned pattern. And then what did we say? The more you do it, the better you get. The better you get, the easier it is. And the more you do it, the better you get. And pretty soon that person goes off in those directions that almost automatically.
So it's practicing it.
And it's just getting, I mean, they're just getting better and better and better and better and better and better at thinking that way, because that's the way that protects them from the reality they don't want to see or have to deal with. That's, and for our clients, once again, a lot of that stuff's going to be themed in what? Their cognitive dissonance resolution thing. Once I sneak everything in there back on it. And again, every time that pays off, I'm going to do it again because it worked. It's working. It's working. The point is right now, they learned that. So we can help them unlearn that. And as we help them unlearn that, we're going to, yes, and then we're going to teach them a different way to think instead. And we're going to help them learn how to then identify and appreciate the payoffs for a different way of thinking. Does that make sense? So because that kind of thinking never solves a problem. It just makes it worse. For our clients, once again, that kind of thinking is just full of what? Use cue associations. One thing after another. Oh, this is bad. Oh, that's unfair. Oh, this is that. Oh, he, she, they. Okay, every one of those is another little use cue association. Pretty soon, by the time they get done with a few sentences worth of that kind of thinking, they get every reason in the world to do whatever they want. You see what I'm saying with that? And again, that doesn't make that person a bad person. That's where we have to get over that. That's the way that brain works. That brain, don't forget you guys, 95% of what this brain is about is right here. This brain doesn't give a shit about most of what concerns us modern humans, because none of that would matter if we're not basic 4F level surviving in the first place. Do you see what I'm saying with that? Nothing that we are so worried about in this modern life, day and age, is going to matter to that brain if it's not feeling safe, secure. By thinking that way, that's helping that brain feel safe and secure. And that brain loves that. As a matter of fact, every time we think a certain way, not that it's right, but and it's not because we're bad, not because we're stupid, not because there's something wrong with it. We've learned to. That brain has learned how to start to protect yourself this way a long time ago. And every time we think that way, which helps this brain feel safe, what else does it do? It lights up that pleasure center. That feels that good. I thought this way. It made me feel safer to think this way. So there, and gang, when that pleasure, what did we say about that pleasure center? That fast track to memory. And so this stuff, it's not that it's an affliction or a disease this person has. It's just a well-learned, very well-learned way to try and make sense out of. To try and give meaning to. That's why I ask that person a lot. You know, I want to know, how are they thinking in that way? This is their way of giving meaning to something in a way that it doesn't have to feel so bad about themselves. Does that make sense? And again, I mean, that's what what is this? Cognitive dissonance resolution? What is all that stuff? On the surface, that's bullshit, that's stupid, that's ridiculous, that's this and everything else. To that person outside looking in. What is that stuff to that person doing that? It's their protection system. It's their protection system. It's working. It's helping this part of the brain feel better. And if this part of the brain's not feeling better, to hell with everything else. Does that make sense, you guys? Do you see what I'm saying with that? And as you guys understand that, well, number one, you need to understand this, because how are you going to teach it to the client if you don't? Number two, then you don't have to get so damn mad at that client either. Because the client, they are going to. I mean, once again, I go back to this, what you don't have to say. Once again, cognitive dissonance. What else is this? All of those ways that they drive counselors nuts with the resistance and the denial and the minimization and the blaming other people and all that other stuff. All that stuff that drives counselors nuts. Are they doing that because they just want to ruin your day? They're doing that because that's how they learn to feel safe. Does that make sense? And when you understand that, when you can help that client see that. Gang, everything we talked about Tuesday was basically about how do we get into that thought system? How do we help that person see that? How do we understand it in a way that we can explain that to the client well enough that they can understand it? And gang, very often, just seeing that, when we've said several times, that's where the utility, the value of sometimes, what did I say, with, active listening, reflection of feelings and things like that, just letting the client hear themselves. And the best way to do that, don't forget, when they're talking, well, they heard themselves, they heard what they said. No, they didn't really. We reflect back so that they really can hear themselves. And just working with those kinds of things, you guys, and all of that together, and the next thing you know, this slowly starts to make sense. Other wow points from how about this side of the room? Wow points from Tuesday. We talked about a lot of very important stuff. Yes, wow point.
I like how she pointed out the feelings and thoughts thing, because
I'm sorry.
I like how she pointed out the feelings and thoughts point, and it just made me think about how the addict actually disassociates their feelings and thoughts a lot more than any counselor
Right.
ever really thinks about, and it could become an issue and a problem in your counseling.
And then another thing is this, don't forget another thing about this, you guys. By the time we get that client, not only do they not know the difference between thoughts and feelings, not only do they do what you just, but that person, by that point, are terrified of their feelings anyway. Every one of those feelings are just another reason to feel bad, mad, sad. Every one of those feelings, they're just another used to association. Every one of those feelings just help me realize how really fucked up and terrible and unfair and all that this is in the first place. Do you see what I'm saying? And that kind of a thing. And so that client is terrified of those feelings. And so, yeah, and like I say, next semester, why not now? Because right now we're building our understanding of how and why that thing is happening in the first place. By understanding this brain. And of course, assessment. Remember, that whole assessment thing is about what? Making that connection in a way that you can know that person. And again, it's one thing to fill out the official forms and the official diagnoses and all that kind of a thing, but it's another, moving to that individual case conceptualization where you make that contact in a way that you know that person. And the best way to know that person is to understand that person is a human. Let's understand how humans work then. And so what we're doing first semester was basic psychology. That served as the building blocks for what we're doing this semester, which is what? Building the raw materials of understanding that person so that next semester we can use that raw material understanding to help make change in their life. Motivational interviewing. Why is that such a part of assessment? Gang, this is going to be offensive. I'll give you a quick example of that. You get arrested today for domestic battery, violence, or something like that, you're going to RET class, among whatever other consequences you're going to face. You're going to RET class. That's a part of the way they do that now. And very often, and again, here I got a group of people now, and they're here, domestic violence, battery. And it's not what happened that resulted in how mad you got, it's how you thought about it. And what you're going to hear some resistance real fast from that. What's going to be the first thing? This is going to feel offensive. So you're trying to tell me it's all my fault. That's what you're trying to say? I am not a bad guy. If she would have shut her damn mouth, I wouldn't have had to. You see what I'm saying? What are they doing? They're trying to protect themselves. I don't want to hear it. You're trying to make it sound like it's all my fault. And this isn't about fault. We gotta knock off the fault stuff. Fault doesn't matter. If this isn't, but that person's going to respond that way. In the beginning, because, because what is A for that batterer? It's the he or the she. Women beat up guys too. But the thing is, it's that other person is the A. And now you're telling me A didn't make me feel that mad? I thought, I'm not a bad person. You're trying to tell me I'm an asshole. I'm not a bad person. And you'll hear that. Because they don't want to hear this. That makes it sound like it's that person's fault. It's not about fault. It's about understanding how and why. Does that person want to think that way? Does that really, to think that this bad thing is happening, that bad thing is happening, to think that somebody is trying to be mean to or bad to you, to think this, does that really? No. Why are they doing that then? Because they need to, in order to come to the conclusion for they don't have to feel so bad, to help this feel better, which makes this feel great, which helps that person fit into this. And as long as they keep doing that, and again, the more you do it, the better you get, the easier it is. Does that make sense, you guys? Do you hear this? These dynamics with that. And so, another issue with this, another problem that people have with this early on, and like I said, is that very often you'll hear, I see what you're saying there, counselor. Yeah, that makes good sense. I see what you're saying there. I could see how that would be for somebody else. But you see, I go right to that mad. I can see how that would work for somebody else, but not me, because I go right because there's something wrong with me, you see. They've been telling me that my entire life. My parents, my counselors, my teachers, my sisters. So I can see how that would work for somebody else. That's where we're going to help that person learn about automatic thinking. Once again, we get so good at the way we think about things, you guys. Again, you think about this, that brain, another one of those basic propositions we talked about. Again, where does the auto thinking come from? That brain that loves habit. The more things it can do without having to think about it, the better for that brain. You think about, do you realize, I said this before, how many things you had to do just to drive your car here today successfully? You realize that if your brain had to have a conscious, aware thought of every one of the things you did just to drive that car, let alone everything else, it would have blown up. It would have said, I'm done, I quit, I'm out of here. I can't do all this. Most of what you do, that brain loves habit. You do it. The more you do it, the better you get, the easier it is. And at some point, that brain's doing it for you. You don't have to think about it anymore. See, I got this. Your brain would have blown up and would say, I quit, I can't do all this. Most of it is unconscious. It becomes. You do it enough times. And it's the same thing with thinking. This thinking, we get so good at it, we don't even know we're doing it anymore. Helping that client see that brain loves habit. The more things it can do without having to think about it, the better. And that includes the way we think about things. Do you see what I'm saying? Thinking, guys, thinking is a very, very expensive thing to do. Thinking demands enormous amounts of metabolic energy. And when we need to think, good, we got a nice thinking brain. But the more that brain can do without having to think about it, the happier it is. And that includes thinking. We get so good at it, we don't even know we're doing it anymore. Yes?
I'm just trying to get some clarification. With A, it's what the situation had happened.
What happens? Whatever it may be. Yeah, something happens.
We're not talking about drug addicts. We're talking about just people in general.
Anybody.
It can be anybody.
People. This is for people.
Okay, and B, what are the thoughts about the situation?
Yes.
Okay, and then you say the client may go back into their cognitive dissonance resolution because of their thinking, their thoughts.
Because they're trying to protect themselves.
Okay, and then C, what are they going to do because of their thoughts and feelings about the situation?
No, C is their feelings, their actual emotional feelings.
So
And then C, how they feel, leads to what they're gonna do.
Leads into what they're gonna do.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Now, when you said about B, you're right. But we don't only think. This is where it becomes the big trick bag for people in general. You're right. This is about people. This isn't about addiction. This is about peopleness. Yeah, we think about, and that can be bad enough all by itself, the way we're thinking about that situation now. But then don't forget, the trick bag. And this is especially something you drug and alcohol counselors need to listen for. How did it go? A, she said no. B, well, I'm mad about that. That upsets me that alone. And that could be just right there, a trigger, couldn't it? A use cue association. How dare she said no? And all that kind of, who does she think she is? And all that. That alone could be enough. But then the trick bag, what was that? We take it to that second level B, the personal story. We turn it into that. What does this really mean? What this really means is, she said no because I'm ugly, worthless, unattractive, nobody will ever want to be with me, and I am going to die alone. Do you hear that? And that's where, gang, it goes to that second level. You know, when the counselor who doesn't understand this, and they're talking to their client about this, let's say, and so you drank this weekend, I hear you saying, yes, I drank this weekend. Well, what was going on? Well, I asked this girl out. I'll tell you, I mean, and we've talked before and a few times, a counseling set. And I finally got the guts to call her up and ask her to dinner, and she said no. And that counselor is going to, the idiot bad counselor, that's when they're going to get in that client, so you threw everything away because she said no. You see what I'm saying? And they're going to ridicule that client for that. And they're going to, but that wasn't. You mean that's all it's going to take? This is how important your recovery is. Some gal says no, and that's all it takes.
She said no, it was because of the way you thought about it.
It wasn't that, though. It wasn't because she said no. It was how that person took that to the next level.
Well, but how is that next level B? Isn't that just B?
That's just the second level B.
What's the first level
The
of
first
B?
level B is I'm upset about the fact she said no.
Isn't that C?
No. The first level B, upset is, you're right. Thank you. But the first level B is, I'm just thinking to myself, I asked her out, she said, no, I don't like that. That's unfair. How come? Who does she think she is?
Okay, all right.
But, now, is that enough? Okay, so I don't like she said no. I think I'll go get loaded. And that counselor sitting there saying to that person, so that's all it takes, huh? She said no, and that's your fucking excuse to go out and get drunk? That's how important this is to you, huh? Well, I'll tell you what, we got something growing up to do, don't we? You see what I'm saying? But gang, it wasn't that. What you need to hear is, and this is where the what did that mean to you question comes in. And that's where you're going to hear the second level B. What that really means to me is, I'm ugly, stupid, nobody wants to be with me, I'm going to die alone. Now, maybe her saying no to your invitation to dinner wasn't, but by the time this person gets done writing for themselves, scripting for themselves, this horror story of what their life really is, you see what I'm saying?
The no triggers the thought process.
So, do you hear this very important point again, you guys? When that client, because you're going to hear some of you're going to think to yourself, really? You relapse. Why? Really? That's all it took for you to. But and if that bad counselor, that's where they stop, and now they denigrate the client because what a stupid reason that. You guys are going to hear. You're going to understand. That's where that. What did that mean to you? She said no. I asked her out. She said no, and yeah, I'm angry about that. How dare she said no? And that. Okay, I hear what you're saying. Now tell me, when she said no, what does that mean to you? Do you hear how I said that? Mm-hmm. That's where you're going to hear that second level, the self-story. And by the time that person gets done with that second level, it's not that she said no, which becomes the use cue. It's I'm going to die alone. Well, what the hell?
Might as well get
You
drunk.
need a ride to the bar. Do you hear what I'm saying? Do you hear what I'm saying with that? Did that answer your consternation?
Yes.
And that's the thing, you guys. And again, yes. And when we talk about that B, yes, we want to hear the first B things. Because that can be enough. I asked her out, she said no, and I'm fucking pissed off. That fucking bitch. Who does she think she is? That could be enough, couldn't it? Right there.
But see, when you phrase it like that, I'm fucking pissed off, that fucking bitch. Really more than I'm pissed off. That seems like you're seeing it.
That's a C.
Okay.
I'm pissed off.
Okay.
I'm that
That'd be
mad.
enough. That's what he said.
Those are C things.
Okay.
How come I'm that mad? Because how dare she said no? Who does she think she is? She thinks she's better than me or what?
Okay.
Those are those first level B thoughts. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
But then again, the counselor who doesn't understand this, they hear that and then that's when they're denigrating. Well, so that's all it took for you to fucking go hungry. Really? That's all it took? You see what I'm saying with that? Probably that's not all it took. You got to hear. And this is where when you hear that first level B, when you hear what this is, this is where, what does that mean to you? Is such an important question because now you're going to hear the real meaning. The real reason why they went out and got drunk or used or whatever. Well, it wasn't because she said no. Damn it, yeah, that pisses me off. And, no, fuck, there ain't no woman worth drinking over. Then what the hell did you drink over for? That's a stupid idiot counselor question.
Mm-hmm.
What you need to listen for and ask, what did that mean to you? What does that mean that she said no? What does that mean about you? That's the B stuff that is going to create the boiling cauldron of the use cue associations. Does that make sense, you guys? Mm-hmm. You hear what I'm saying? That's what you got to listen for. That's what we got to work on. That second level B is so damn important in this whole scheme. That's what, how are we going to understand that second level B? That's where, once again, as I repeated several times last time, that's why we need to understand the process to the product itself when we do assessment. That's why we need to understand the learning history when we try and understand how and why. How did this person get to the point that they're thinking this way that's making this worth it in a way? And why have they convinced their brain that's the way to feel safe? On the surface, that's not feeling safe at all. What do you mean feeling safe? My life sucks. I'm always in trouble. I'm always this and that. Then why do you keep doing it? And this is where. Because it's working. Whatever that cost is, what they're getting for it, that negative reinforcement is still worth more than that cost.
Is that kind of turning it into the I'm the victim?
I'm the victim, the poor me. And anything like that, any of those kinds of stories. You hear what I'm saying? All that. And listen for that second level B. Gang, that brain loves habit. When you try, on the surface, stop thinking that way. Okay, don't forget, that brain that loves habit. How does that work? And we're going to look at right around the corner, neurons, and how neurons talk to each other, and how drugs actually affect specific neurons in that brain. This thing composed of billions of neurons. And when we look at, and again, that brain that loves habit, that brain that it doesn't know what's important until you tell it what's important. How do you tell it what's important? Repetition. Do it again. Again, the more you do it, the better you get, the easier it is. Repetition, repetition. 2 and 2 is 4. 2 and 2 is 4. 2 and 2 is 4. Bang, got it in there. 2 and 2 is 4. Automatic thinking now. As soon as I said 2 and 2, you don't even have to have a conscious thought. 4 is already happening in your head. That's how automatic it is. Life sucks, I'm ugly, I can't. Life sucks, I'm ugly, I can't. Poor me, life sucks, I'm ugly, I can't. Poor me, life... Got it. Poor you, life sucks, you're ugly, you can't. That brain doesn't know the difference between 2 and 2 and I can't. All it knows is you keep telling it something enough times, it must be important. Let's lock it in there. Yes?
Going to a real life subject, and I'm not going to talk a lot because I talk too much. But real life subject. Situation happened. A, I failed the test. B, what was my thoughts? I did the best I could, and this man still tried to fail me, and everybody else passed. Okay, those were my thoughts. Then I came with feelings.
What were the two inaccurate things you said there?
I failed the test.
No.
Well, I know I failed the
No,
test.
what were the two inaccurate
Situation.
things? There were two things you said to yourself that right here at your B level that were inaccurate. What were they? I didn't fill out the answers to that test. How the hell did I make you fail that test? Number one. Number two, everybody else did good except me, which leads logically to the next thing, he must be against me. That was inaccurate also. Not everybody else did that good on the test. You were operating under inaccurate B.
But did
thoughts.
that stop under C? Because even though I had my feelings, I didn't go and say, well, I need to go take me a hit because I'm so stressed out right now.
Right. Why? Because you're already training your brain to move that in a different way.
Right.
That's what that's all
I had a
about.
conversation with you.
Now,
Some of the things that you said, I heard it but didn't hear it. You know that.
There you go.
had a
There you
conversation.
go.
Then I had another conversation with a non-counselor who gave me their opinion. I didn't want to hear what their opinion was because it was basically, they're all against me because they're both together.
There
They're
you
both
go.
saying the
See,
same thing.
So one of the first things you help that person, you're gonna have a client in this same situation. The first thing you start to do is you look for the inaccuracies. You made two very important inaccurate statements there. Number one, I made you fail the test. How the hell did I make you fail the test? I didn't sit there and fill those answers out for you.
Right.
And number two, that everybody else did good except me. Those aren't accurate statements. You see what I'm saying?
That was
And that's one of the
part
things.
of rigid thinking.
And that's where, and thank you for giving me that example, because one of the things you gotta listen for real quick is, when you begin this, and when you're assessing this thinking, you need to listen for it. You know, it's one thing to have a thought that is just unnecessary. That's one thing. I asked her out, she said no. Who does she think she is? She thinks that's one thing. But when your response to the A is from the very beginning based on inaccurate thoughts in the first place, no wonder you're off to the races. You see what I'm saying? And that's where we're going to help that client. We're going to help that client slow down. One of the big things, slow down enough. Hear what you're saying. I made you flunk that. How the hell did I make you flunk that test? And isn't that, I mean, what did I sneak in your head and make you write down wrong answers? I mean, come on, let's get real here. That's what you're going to help that client. Let them hear their inaccuracies with that. Because one of the biggest reasons why these C's go running off into the crazy places they go, all those feelings that lead us to the dumb stuff we do, very often is because we are basing our thoughts on inaccurate statements in the first place. Do you see what I'm saying? See, thank you. Because that's such a, you've got to hear this stuff with these clients so that they can hear this. So that they can hear that also. No, you're right. I'm sitting there thinking that asshole did that against me on purpose because they don't, well, no wonder I felt so. Come on, is that real? I mean, really? Did he sneak in my head that night and make me write down wrong answers? Yeah, that's what he did.
Rationalization,
Rationalization, all that stuff.
Find out a reason why. Could it really been me? I know I got some of them right. He could have gave me credit for that, but no, he was just really giving me about the bad. And so
There you go.
I
There you go.
had to actually go back into my internal self. Then I talked to somebody that had more logical thinking than me at that particular time because I wasn't thinking right. Then I had another person. There's another person telling me, yeah, well, if you'd have just sat there and been trying to pay attention to what he was saying and wrote the notes down, bits and pieces, and gave me information like a counselor, good counselor would have, which they're not counselors, but they were to me last night. You know what I'm
You got
saying?
it.
And so then I actually had to internalize and say, you know what?
And what did you just
All of
learn
them
about
right.
how to be a good counselor?
All of them was right. I had to.
And what did you learn about how to be, when you apply that same stuff and help your clients see that now? And that's what that's all about. Yes.
But isn't that just what he's doing, basic human behavior anyways? That's what we do.
It is. Why is it? Because
I mean, we all do
what
it.
that test became
tiger.
A tiger.
The tiger. And if we let that test grow big enough fangs, the next thing you know, no, we're not thinking rationally. Come on, what do I mean he made me flunk this test?
Take
What the
somebody
hell does that
outside of the situation
But-
and bring it.
But listen, because I want to answer that question. Why did, well, he didn't make me flunk that test. How can he make me flunk that test? Well, that's silly to even think that. But why not? Because once this kicks in, that kind of thinking shuts down. And so, what we do is we help that client see how they are tiger makers. We help them see, once again, whether it's A makers or A escalators, taking it personal, any of those kinds of things. We help listen for that first level B.
So,
Damn, I wish I hadn't done so poorly on this test. I'm angry because I didn't do as well as I wanted to on that test. But then what's that second level? There must be another reason why I did so poorly on, because the minute if we think severe enough at level 1, we turn that right into an attacking tiger.
Are we gonna learn how to stop it?
We're gonna learn all that.
so basically understanding ABC, understanding this idea, this is opening the door for cognitive therapy, which then we'll walk right through once we can explain it to her.
Once that client,
Okay.
and again,
That's the interface.
are you a different
Right.
person today than you were yesterday?
Yeah.
Yes, you are. That's what cognitive therapy is.
Yes. Yes.
There it is, you guys.
Sometimes it don't work as fast.
Well, no, it never works as fast, really, because don't forget.
You thought too much about a certain thing. You thought too much about, oh, I gotta get them bills paid and
Remember
all
this,
these
you guys.
things, and combined, everything that may have been going wrong, and there's no getting out of it.
That's what happens.
15, 20 of y'all would've came in there and tried to counsel me on,
And that's
hey,
what
y'all
happens.
put your bills and stuff. No.
One little lay,
bad.
and then this thing just runs
Busting
off to
the
the
windows.
races. And it starts to make it, well, get the bills, got this, got that, and now that son of a bitch, and he made, oh, this is, you see what I'm saying? It just.
But the fact that you talked about it and you're understanding where your thought went from 1 to 2 says a lot. Like you're taking this and you're applying it to yourself. I did the same thing. And I'm like, whoa, I do this. So now that I understand it, the next time something happens, I can stop myself and be like, okay, here I am, I'm doing it. And then
I think
you'll get it.
that was one of the things I was gonna ask him about too.
Yeah.
About the looks on the faces and
All that kind of stuff.
the looks, and I'm
Everything.
looking at him and I'm like, why is he steady coming over here? He know I failed the test. He's trying to make fun of me. He's already premeditated me to
I'm
fail.
doing that right now,
You
again,
know?
aren't I?
Right.
That's what I said.
You said
Doo-doo.
It's kind of like
You're not able to, not because you're dumb, it's because that's how the brain works.
Yeah.
Once that tiger fighter kicks in, all that thinking, I want to get this, and I see 2 hands here. But again, isn't it, yes, it's hard. Don't forget, that brain that loves habit, what's the other thing? That brain that once it gets a hold of something, it don't want to let it go. Just because you tell somebody, don't think that way about yourself. Okay, you're probably right, I got to quit it. And then the very next time you see that same client, they're thinking that way, you're like, oh, I thought we talked about this. What do you think? That brain is not going to let that go that easy.
Right.
Don't forget, every time that worked, they got stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. What did we say last time is such an example of that? Don't forget with these 1s and 2s. Every time you use a 1 or a 2 to understand a current now situation, that's not the past anymore,
Right.
it's your now.
Yeah.
Every time you do that, you get better at it. The more you do it, the better you get, the better you get. And so, no, it's not going to go easy.
Right.
And besides that client's going to resist it to start with. You're trying to tell me it's all my fault. It's got not a damn thing to do with fault anyway.
How does anyone successfully make it through treatment in 30 days? This sounds like
They
it's going to take
don't.
years.
Well,
Well, that's where, and that's another, 30 days, you're not going to do this in 30 days. All you can do is plant seeds and then hopefully get continuing care after that. No, you're not going to do this in 30 days. You'll be lucky to get it half started
Yeah, good
in
God.
a couple months.
Yeah.
And no, this takes time, you guys, and this is where you counselors understanding this. And this is where, once again, how can you as effectively and efficiently, given the limitations you have? Question, thought,
I was thinking,
I want to bring other people, you guys, this is powerful stuff.
like, when we went through RDAP, we had the 8 attitudes, which one was responsibility, which pretty much was accountability. I know what the belief system would be with your thoughts, which is pretty much your belief system. You didn't make yourself accountable for your actions. Like, you would always blame somebody else. And when I went through that, I learned how to be accountable for my own actions.
And part of that is awareness. Exactly.
You're responsible for your own outcome with those choices you made.
You're telling me I'm an asshole. I don't want to. She made me so mad. If she would have shut up. If she would have
saying that.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah, you can put a he there just as easy.
Fighting people,
Right.
right?
A he, she.
Please do me.
Whatever it is.
Damn roughneck.
I know, right?
And then we start to build, we start to make up stories to try and justify this.
Yeah.
And all that stuff you got. And that is not because we're bad, stupid, dumb, or what is it?
What you learn.
It all boils down to one bottom line is none of that matters anymore. I got to protect myself. The tigers. My problem is, what tigers are we so busy protecting ourselves? The ones we make by the way we think about it. That's what that's all about. Yes.
Okay, an observation after this yes/no question. Is the second level B related to confabulation?
No.
Because confabulation is limited only to delusional.
If we're gonna stick to what a definition of confabulation
Yes,
is.
and that's what I'm asking.
Confabulation is basically that's a problem. That's a neurological problem, a dementia-related problem. We talked about that with Korsakoff last semester, where that person is moving along mentally in their present, and then all of a sudden they run into a blank space.
Okay.
Where they just start filling it in. Now, this
This
is
is a simple
motivated.
rationalization, the motivated rationalization.
Right.
Okay. That was my question. The observation was you mentioned it before I got to say this, and that was that you planted the seed. That seed was germinating in Herman, is that the name? In Herman's head. And there was a TV show called Herman's Head. But there was it was growing in your head and you couldn't get it out, and it wasn't until somebody put sunshine on it, you'd already been nurturing that and fertilizing that,
They
putting sunshine. Huh?
They didn't soft shoe it either.
No.
See, I don't
Well,
take salt.
you
I
got to
put
till the
pride.
earth. You
I'm
got to
not
till the
gonna-
earth. You can't be gentle when you till the earth.
Professor took me outside. I took up a lot of his time, and I'm still trying to make my point, not listening to what he's saying.
Right, so my observation is that this doesn't apply just to you. It applies to me, everybody else. Plant the seed, it's going to stick. And
If you
it's
plant
not going
it
to...
well.
If you
Huh?
Plant it well.
Plant it well.
I
If you plant it well,
understood
yeah, if you plant it well. You have to plant it
I
right.
thought about
Yeah.
it, went home and thought about it, but then I got on a website and then I started venting, and I did use premeditated to fail, but I didn't put nobody's name. The person turned around and say, I know who you're talking about. You're not gonna talk about him like that.
But the
Because
point
he's
is this.
teaching us and this, and then
I don't wanna
had
relive
think
that
about-
moment,
Yeah,
but-
no, he's saying, but,
Well.
you know,
The point is this.
Professor said-
I started that, I'm sorry.
He said, they're all right. How stupid could I have been to
Oh, was
sit
that
there
a-
arguing with somebody
And
that's
guess
telling me
what?
the truth?
It turns out you weren't stupid after all. You were human.
Yeah.
Right.
Every one
That's
of us-
it right there. That's the point I was trying to make with
We've
you.
all been there.
Like, dude, we've all been here. It's stop.
See, that's where.
Relax.
Because by saying at this level how stupid I was, I'm going to correct that and say that doesn't make you stupid. That makes you human.
Yes.
You see what I'm
Yes.
saying? Why? Gang, back to this brain. Because whatever we do, we take whatever it is, and by the way we think about it as a tiger, what we do from that point on, it's got nothing to do with right, wrong, stupid, or smart, or nothing else. It's got to do with fuck everything, I'm out here to kill a tiger now. That brain that kicks in, yes.
So I'm confused about you said if they're saying incorrect things to correct them.
To help them see their incorrectness and help them correct themselves.
Okay. Because, I mean, their thoughts, with B, are always gonna really be incorrect, aren't they?
No, they don't have to be incorrect.
They can be unnecessary.
They can be unnecessary, they can be unnecessary. They don't have to be, how about this? She said no. I asked her out, she said no. First of all, that's not incorrect. That's the truth. I don't like that. That's not incorrect, and that's not even irrational. But it's where I go from there. And since I don't like that, number one, I can't stand that. Boy, am I so fucking mad. But then the other way I go also is, and since she said no, well, here's what it means. I'm stupid, worthless, ugly, nobody wants to be with me. That's where you start to listen for those incorrectness statements.
So you want to correct the level 2 B then, right?
Well, you want to hear and be responding and working with both levels.
And then guide them into seeing it.
When you find some, and there may be people, I mean, it's not that every A has a second level B or anything else like that.
Yeah.
But when you guys need to be especially, and I want to make sure I answer your question, you guys want to be especially vigilant listening for the second level B, because usually by the time somebody gets into a life circumstance like severe addiction, they're probably operating under a whole bunch of those second level B.
And sometimes that wasn't the point of the lecture, that sometimes most often we skip B to begin with, and we go to C. We go from A to C. We don't even use B.
We think that.
Okay.
What happened made me feel so bad, Matt said.
Right.
Now, did I answer your question? Or your confusion?
Yes.
And it's not that, no, B doesn't have to be inaccurate. But even if we take an accurate B, if by what we end up doing with it, it can become inaccurate or really severe unnecessarily. You see what I'm saying? And that's the thing. And that's what we're getting. This is it. People do not ruin their lives for the fun of it. All this stuff, none of it. This is all, everything we talk is all built around. 95% of human psychology is right here. If this brain doesn't feel good here, it doesn't give a damn about anything else anyway. You hear what I'm saying with that? That's the point of that. I also want to. We're going to take a break. I want to thank our colleague for self-disclosing, and we're going to take a break and get back and more with. Now let's start to take a look at this brain that never forgets, that loves habits, and all that kind of stuff. And again, understand. How do we understand the anomalies of the human experience? Via understanding this brain. Everything we talked about Tuesday really is about this brain. And as we get ourselves into that, then, if you think about it, royal, irrational spin, what is that then doing to two of the things that we talked about at the very beginning, way back last August? Self-efficacy, outcome efficacy. How the hell can I do anything about this when, no matter what I do, somebody else is trying to ruin it for me anyway? You see what I'm saying? That's where self-efficacy, outcome efficacy comes in. And then, gang, what you're going to hear is, of course, that person who takes that to the supreme level of God, or whatever their deity may be, is doing this to me. And you're going to hear that. And that's that, again, that outcome efficacy thing. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, no matter what this, that, it's not going to work anyway, because he, she, they, them, the big guy is against me. Do you see what I'm saying with this? That's what we talked about with that self-efficacy, outcome efficacy. You know, well, I'll tell you, one way or another, I sneak some old concept back into everything we talk about, don't we? This is how this is working, you guys. And again, the whole point of what we're looking at now, this is where all that stuff is happening. This is why all that stuff is happening. And we've got to remember some of these things, that when this stuff is happening in our modern brain, yeah, with all due respect to mental illness. I mean, none of this works for a schizophrenia patient who thinks what they're thinking right now and believes what they're believing. Of course not. Or something like that. most of the clients, yeah, you may end up working in a MISA program, as a matter of fact, but most of the clients you're going to work with are not mentally ill. It's just, they are so. Why are they so involved in this? Because their brain believes that's what they need to be doing right now. Why? Because they have thought themselves into that den of tigers in their life. Does that make sense? Do you hear what I'm saying with this? Again, some of those basic propositions. That very old brain, that learned about this world a long time ago when it was a world full of tigers. That brain, hey, that means it's good for you, love it, do lots of it. Do you see what I'm saying with that? This old brain right here, all this brain knows is, you know what? If I got a tiger coming, to hell with the thinking. We shut everything down and we kick ass right now. That's all that matters. This old brain, it doesn't know the difference between a real tiger and the tiger we made by the way we thought about it. That brain that loves habit. That's why so much of what we do. And gang, when we get with our client and we start to talk about these things, that is going to feel foreign to them. And again, very often you will hear that client say, you know what, I see how that works for other people, but for me, I just go right to it because I must have a disease. I must be, uniquely flawed. No, it's just that they're that good at it now. That brain loves that habit. The more that brain can do without having to think about it, the more it likes it. Then it's got plenty of time to think about stuff it needs to think about. I don't want to think about all this other shit. I mean, again, I can't think of a better example. If you had to have a same level of conscious thought and awareness of everything it took for your brain to get you to school this morning, you wouldn't be here. Your brain could have never done it. I quit. I'm done. You're asking way too much of me. You see what I'm saying with that? That brain that never forgets. And I know, what are you talking about never forgets, Kels? I forgot half that test or whatever. I forgot half that chemistry test. When it comes to survival, you guys, that brain never forgets. When that brain figures out a way to think about something and a way to make tigers go away, it doesn't forget that very well either. That person, not only, and that's why this is going to feel very foreign to that person in the beginning. You need to understand, what is this? It's not stupid. It's not bad. It's what? It's human. It's the way that brain is working. If we train this brain well enough that its world is full of tigers, it's just doing what it learned it needed to do a very long time ago. Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying with that? And so what we have to do then is understand that in a way that, well, number one, not only do drugs, when we talk about now drugs with this and alcohol, not only do drugs and alcohol in the big picture make that level of consciousness change enough that we don't feel those tigers as much. That's what the payoff is. I'm mad, bad, sad, drink, I don't give a fuck. You see what I'm saying? That alone is a powerful negative reinforcer. But what we're going to also see as we continue with this is those drugs actually do change the way the brain is working. That's what do anti-anxiety drugs do? They make this part of the brain stop working so hard. You see what I'm saying? Anti-anxiety drugs don't address or change the reason why that person has anxiety, but it makes this tiger fighter slow down a little bit. Never forget this. The minute this tiger fighter starts up, the thinking starts to go. Once this tiger fighter is full force, the thinking has shut down. Yeah, on the surface now, we're doing, being, saying, thinking really dumb, stupid, asshole things. Not because we are a dumb, stupid asshole, but because we are human, and that's how that brain works with that stuff. What was that other thing we said? The curious. Again, the curious paradox. Most of the things that we love to hate about people today are the very things that made it possible for us to be here today in the first place. That brain that learned a long time ago. Quick, cheap, and easy is the way to go. That brain that learned a long time ago, the best way to get something is take it, no matter what. It doesn't matter what it costs. That brain that learned a long time ago, immediate gratification. That brain that learned a long time ago, the only thing that really matters is right this split second now. Not the past. that helped me learn about how you're and why you're a tiger now. But right now, and well, you know what? In 10 minutes, when I sit back, calm down, and think about how I just hurt your feelings, and how I just damaged, well, probably not only this evening, but maybe our relationship. Maybe, you know what? Then, but when I'm doing it, that brain doesn't give a shit, because all you are now is a tiger. And if I don't kill that tiger, nothing else matters anyway. Do you guys hear how important that is for understanding why we do some of the stuff we did with that? We've got to, what we help, I mean, in the broad sense, then what we do is we help this client stop becoming a tiger maker in the big broad sense. And yes, we're going to get way deep into this ABC next semester when we begin that. This brain, that second thing that, yeah, in the big picture, drugs, they do just change our awareness in a way that it doesn't feel quite so bad, and that feels damn good. Don't forget, the most powerful way there is to feel good is to not feel bad. We talked about that last semester. That's called negative reinforcement. Gang, the second way, how this brain works. Those drugs affect really how it works. Gang, all of those things from top down, don't forget, the old brain that's reacting to. Then we're going to look at that middle brain, the limbic system brain, that reacts with the environment. And we're going to take a big look at that. And then, of course, this neocortex. Let's start a top-down, just basic functional anatomy of this brain. We keep talking about this brain. Let's get to know this brain, at least at a level that when we get into neurons, it's going to start to make a little bit better sense. The old brain reacts to, the middle brain reacts with, the new brain that thought about and changed that environment. Hopefully for our better. That's the brain. It's this new brain one day. I'm hauling back that mammoth meat and I'm tired and hot and I start to look for sticks and stones and nuts and berries and I'm pissed off. And all of a sudden there was an earthquake and I noticed the rolling rocks. That's the part of the brain that said, hey, let's call that a wheel. I mean, it'd be a hell of a lot easier to pull this that way. That's the part of the brain that changed that environment. Thought about and changed the environment. One of the things you have to remember, though, every time we think about and change something, while we may have solved an old brain problem, we just created a new brain problem. That day, how did that story go? Here I am again. It's hotter than hell out. I'm hauling my big old mammoth bag. I'm tired. I still got to look for nuts. And all of a sudden I know, you got, well, look at those nuts and berries. You got the best looking nuts and berries I ever saw. Where do you get, I don't even know where she finds those kinds of, those are the best damn nuts and berries I ever saw. Don't forget, what does the old brain say?
Take it.
Whack you in the head, take your nuts and berries. So there you go again, Kelsey. Don't think about tomorrow. You're always immediate gratification. What was wrong with that? I don't know where she got her nuts and berries. Besides that, I'm going to have no more time tomorrow to get nuts and berries than I had today. It was that middle brain that one day stopped me from whacking her head and said, hey, let's talk about this for a minute. I'll make you a deal. This newer brain modulating that behavior, working with that limbic system in a way that we were able to do that. Which is nice, because now we're not mortal enemies anymore. Which is nice, because now I don't even have to worry about nuts and berries anymore. I'm going to just rely on our nut and berry getter.
So
and you want to join us, you can be our stick and stone getter. And you see what I'm saying?
Was it the midbrain that stopped you from hitting her in the head, or was it the new brain that
The
stopped you?
midbrain is what basically starts to, in a very primitive way, start to modulate that behavior.
Okay.
Ultimately, it took that new brain for us to start to talk about it and work it through.
So they kind of work together to stop
Yes,
you from hitting her in the
yes.
head? Okay.
Yes. But then, what's the problem we got now? Yesterday, our problem was real simple, easy. Mortal enemies, who gets the biggest stick fastest, whacks them in the head. Today, we got to what?
Worry about feelings.
Worry about your feelings, and now we got to talk about it. Do you realize, I mean, anybody can be a tough guy. Just get lucky enough to get the biggest stick fastest. You realize how much mental energy and intelligence it takes to not give in to that? That's one of that frontal lobe's most important functions, as a matter of fact, that stop sign. And again then, per your question, that stop sign, if we dig the hole, put that stop sign in deep enough, we're going to see that that hole goes right into, guess what? The limbic system.
Okay.
the bottom of the stand that stop sign is on is sitting in the limbic system. Does that make sense, you guys? And we're going to see that. But gang, let's take a look at this outer core, the new brain that's thinking. And again, basically, another problem of trying to talk about the brain is we oversimplify it so much. What is that? Kind of looks like a political map of Brazil. What the hell? And we got frontal lobe county, we got parietal lobe county, we got a central lobe temporal. I wish if it were even close to this simple, we'd be so much better off understanding this right now. We're not even close to understanding this yet in so many different ways. Basically, that frontal lobe, what were the three big? Don't forget the three big functions. Number one is, well, it is. We would say this is basically the area of higher intellectual human thought, cognitive thought, beyond 4F thought. The frontal lobe is often identified as that part of the brain that differentiates us mentally from the other animals. We are able to think out of the 4F box. Introspective, hypothetically, that kind of a thing. What's the second job of this is, well, what did we call it? The executive functions. Remember, what were those executive functions? Our ability to become aware of an issue, a need, a drive state, and then assemble executive functions to be able to become aware of the set of steps necessary to do it.
So simply put, it would be like the executive functions assemble the pieces to complete a task.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
Okay.
An individual with executive function problem, once again, I know I have to go to the bathroom. I know there's a room down the hall special for that purpose. But I can no longer assemble the set of steps necessary to pull that off, and I am soiling myself where I sit. Those executive functions. And gang, we talked about what loosens up this stop sign? Well, disease, injury, drugs, alcohol, stress. Guess what? The same thing can happen with those executive functions. We talked about schizophrenia. And it's not that that schizophrenia patient wants to offend people at Kroger and smell funny. It's that under the influence of that schizophrenia, their executive functions are compromised. It's not that they want to smell funny. They don't know how to not smell funny. Do you see what I'm saying with that? Those executive functions, it happens under the right level of especially activation, arousal, stress, especially if this is running wild. Why are people peeing their pants at the slot machines at the gambling casino? Our brain loses ability to control. Don't forget. And then let's combine that. Well, I'm going to sneak an oldie but goldie in here. Don't forget. That level of activation, arousal, all this stuff going on in that brain at that point. And don't forget another thing, variable racial reinforcement. Because I know damn well that if I get up and go to the bathroom right now, I know you've been watching me for the last half hour, and you're going to set at my machine, pull that one damn time, and you're going to win the big one. All this stuff working together, you guys. Do you see how that works like that? And the next thing you know, people are soiling themselves where they sit. That brain's forgetting what it needs to be doing because it's under so much of that other level pressure at that point. Yes?
Why does it say up under the new brain, which is the neocortex, that they have a perception and memories, and also the middle brain, which reacts with the environment? It has perception and memories, but the old brain, which reacts just to the environment, it has no perception and memories.
Actually, it does, but it's 4F level. The stuff that old brain remembers isn't from our lifetime, it's from many lifetimes ago.
So it's just action.
It's just that thoughtless level action.
If I got to urinate, I'm going to go wherever's the tree at.
Yeah, hey.
Right.
I mean, why do we have to potty train our dogs? When they gotta go, they gotta go. It doesn't, I'm on the carpet. No.
Natural.
That old brain is just when it's gotta go, it's gotta go.
Right.
We have to train it to do it different.
Right. And that's what you're doing with the middle brain. You're training it.
Well, that middle brain is helping to modulate that. And we're gonna see that. We're gonna get into that middle brain. A lot of stuff in there. A lot of stuff it's doing. That limbic system. And then, of course, another very important function, right along with the executive functions, is that actually the stop sign is kind of a part of those executive functions. And yeah, the pole that holds that stop sign up goes deep into the limbic system.
So is that the third one then, the stop sign?
Yeah, the stop sign.
Is there like a,
Intellectual functioning, executive functions, and the stop sign.
is there a scientific term for stop sign?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, inhibit old brain impulses.
Okay.
Inhibit old brain impulses. Let's take a look then also, we got right here, right behind the frontal lobe, we got another cluster of cells. This is what we call the motor cortex band right here in our little political map of Brazil. And gang, that brings us to talk about what I call the motor cortex. The motor triad. The motor triad. When we talk about motor, and think about motor for a minute, do you realize how many parts of that brain have to be working exquisitely just right well for you to be sitting there right now, not fall over and writing stuff? Do you realize how many parts of that brain is involved in that? Let alone anything close to a more complex behavior? And that. And when we talk about the motor cortex, we're talking about this right here. But this is just part of the motor triad. The second part of the motor triad is right here, the cerebellum. The cerebellum, once again, basic coordination, integration of the things necessary for more complex behaviors. The cerebellum, motor memory, remembering how to do something. Who's the guitar player? The pianist? The artist? The bricklayer? Or whatever it is. Remembering how to do things. Hey, a whole bunch of classical conditioning living right here. Yeah. That's second part of the motor triad. Triad means three. The third part of the motor triad. Well, we're going to have to kind of open this up right here at the lateral fissure and look inside, and it's called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia. You've heard of the basal ganglia. Talked about that last semester. With what disease? Who remembers? Schizophrenia. Let's take a look at this for a minute. How, by understanding that brain, we can understand something. How and why drugs work. The basal ganglia plays a major role also in fine and gross motor control. These all three need to work together to orchestrate our ability to do what we're doing. That basal ganglia, we often talk about the basal ganglia, the pyramidal and the extrapyramidal systems. Now, that's got to do with how long the neurons are. We're not going to worry about that. But we have the pyramidal and the extrapyramidal systems. That basal ganglia, when we start talking very soon now about neurons, how do neurons talk to each other? Via what? Neurotransmitters, special chemicals. And probably one of the best known of those special chemicals today is what? Dopamine. Everybody's talking about dopamine. Dopamine. Well, that's the reason why we're all drug addicts. You know, it's because of dopamine. That's real wrong. But dopamine does lots of things. One of the things that dopamine plays a major role in is the basal ganglia. All that fine, once again, fine motor control, all that stuff, all that fine motor control. What else does dopamine seem to be related to? Schizophrenia. When we have an individual suffering the hallucinations, the delusions, the bizarre thoughts, and all the stuff of schizophrenia, that disease, we're not going to talk them out of it. Instead, we're going to give them a medicine. What does that medicine do? Slows down the dopamine.
And then they end up with tardive dyskinesia.
Slows down the dopamine. And what happens is, the problem is, that medicine doesn't know just go to the schizophrenia part of the brain. It's going to affect the dopamine every place where dopamine is, including the basal ganglia. All that motor control. And then what do we see? That side effect. That the tongue rolling, the lip smacking, the facial tics, and that. Remember when they panned on Etta and her fingers were going like this on that film? Tardive dyskinesia. Which, if not addressed, could become an irreversible neurological disease in and of itself. But the thing is, that basal ganglia, yeah, we're taking a medicine to help with schizophrenia. The next thing you know, we're messing with that motor triad. Do you see what I'm saying with that? Oh, by the way, this is why dopamine does have the bad rap it's got today, because dopamine is a very, very, very important player in the pleasure center. And when we take that medicine to slow down the dopamine in the schizophrenia part of the brain, it's also going to slow that dopamine down in the pleasure center part of the brain. And now that person, well, they were terrified and activated and aroused with all the bad stuff going on and all their delusions and hallucinations. Now they got no mood affect at all. That very flat affect, that emotionlessness, that zombie-like demeanor. Why? Because that medicine we took for the schizophrenia, not only is it messing with the basal ganglia, but it's messing with the pleasure center.
So how does Haldol work then?
Haldol?
Yeah.
Same way.
But what is, so if you have someone that's schizophrenic and their thinking is way off,
right?
Why do we give Haldol then if you're going to have a flat affect?
Because Haldol is going to slow down
the
all
dopamine,
of that.
I understand that part, but
Huh?
it's going to block that dopamine, but that flat affect, is that what you
That's
want?
just a sign. No, we don't want that. Every medicine, and we're going to see why when we get into those neurons. Every medicine has side effects.
Right.
And that just is the side effect. We're given the Haldol because what we have decided as a medical society is that alleviating the schizophrenia symptoms is worth having the tardive dyskinesia, if we're careful with it, and flat affect symptoms. What we would love to do, of course, is what? Invent a medicine that doesn't have those side effects.
Right.
That would be the nice thing.
Right.
So now they've got all these new medicines, or at least I see on the TV commercials. There's medicines for the tardive dyskinesia.
Right.
Does that?
Always have been.
Well, so what is
They're
that?
anti-Parkinsonian meds.
Oh,
They're anti-Parkinsonian.
I would say because I was like, what is that? Just
But
put a
guess
little
what?
bit more dopamine back in? Like, how does that work?
But guess what? What does anti-Parkinsonian meds? For example, L-Dopa.
Right.
L-Dopa is a dopamine precursor for people who don't have enough dopamine, and they got Parkinson's.
So it just puts a little more back in.
Which means now you exacerbate the very symptoms you were trying to alleviate by slowing down the dopamine.
So we take too much out, and then we put a little back in.
There you go. There you go. That's how that works. Yes.
So convoluted. Okay.
Yes. 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 You see what I'm saying with that?
Human
But
solutions.
this motor triad, you guys. This motor triad. Motor cortex, right here, posterior to the frontal, the cerebellum, and then again that basal ganglia, all working together.
All right.
Motor, and then we have right here the somatosensory cortex that bleeds into what we call the parietal lobe. Another way to think of the parietal lobe is the association area. Gang, think about this for a minute. One of the big jobs of this brain, of course, is to hear stuff, see stuff, smell stuff, taste stuff, feel stuff, and sensory, right? Taking in all this stuff. And we have that very, very complex visual wiring system, that very complex audio wiring system, that very complex tactile feeling system and all that. But the thing is this, you gotta remember something. We're not just seeing something, we're seeing lots of things. And we're not just seeing stuff, we're hearing stuff, feeling stuff, smelling stuff, tasting stuff, dissing and deading stuff. And all this information is coming in at the same time. And that brain, don't forget, that brain's got to somehow or another figure out what is all this all about? Where the fuck is the tiger? The parietal lobe helps to assemble the big picture. Integrates all that sensory information. What's the big picture here? Don't forget, what did I say early on? We can summarize it. Brain takes in all this information, assembles what is the situation so that it can orchestrate what's the next best right thing to do. It's pretty important. Again, we're seeing stuff, smelling stuff, hearing stuff, seeing this and that, and all this stuff coming in. All this stuff coming in. Now, don't forget, another job of that brain is most of that stuff that's coming in gets thrown right back out as soon as it comes in. That's a very important part of that brain. Remember, what did we say? That what this brain needs to learn as soon as possible is not what to worry about, what don't worry about. Well, another thing that brain needs to do, and it starts to learn this real fast if it's given the right opportunity, is most of everything that goes into your brain via your sensory apparatus, your hearing stuff, seeing stuff, most of that gets thrown out as quickly as it gets there. I don't need to be messing with you right now. I got this to worry about. Get out of here. Most of that, it's got to filter that out. Most of it, once again, driving into, if your brain had a conscious awareness of every single thing going into that brain today, not just everything it had to do, but just everything going into that brain. I want you all to think about this example for a second. How about this? Think about this for a minute. Right this very second, I want you to think about your butt sitting on that chair. Now you're thinking about it, aren't you? Were you thinking about it before I said so? Your brain, why? Can you imagine the millions of sensory neurons, the clothing on your skin, your butt on that chair, and everything else? That rubber or leather wrapped around your feet and everything else?
Is that where you get like you see people with sensory processing disorders?
Hold that just 1 second. Hold that one for just a second. Gang, you didn't think about any of that until I just brought it up. Said so, right? Why not? Because your brain, forget about your damn butt on the chair. Listen to the lunatic. You hear what I'm saying? That brain was feeling that every second your butt's on that chair. It's all that sensory stuff's going in, but your brain, forget about the damn butt on the chair.
Until your butt starts to hurt, right?
Or if it's got some reason to become aware of it.
Okay.
Yes. That's that critical. To be able to decide that split second at the very beginning, what's important, what's not, when, where, how, and how much to worry about it. You see what I'm saying with that? You see how that works? What if that's interrupted? And that brain's not doing that filter very well. That brain's starting to feel pretty overwhelmed pretty fast. And we're feeling that as what? Anxiety and tension. Especially, this would be free-floating anxiety. That level of anxious tension, and we have no idea why. And what that is that brain is not filtered. It's not that you're necessarily worried about a specific thing, but at this point, the brain's just not filtering out. It's just feeling overwhelmed. What is it that's interfering with that job to as soon as possible? I mean, out you go. I mean, think about this. The millions of sensory neurons involved right now, they're right this very second, they're firing and doing all that shit. The clothing on your skin, your butt on the chair, this, that, everything else. Let alone all the other stuff going on. Does anybody have one inkling, notion of an idea of any of those pictures back there on that wall? You saw them. What did your brain say? Forget the damn pictures.
Oh.
We got this guy to listen to.
There's like squares and triangles and shit.
Yeah. And that's as far as it went. Said, forget about it, let's worry about this.
That's all I got. That's all I got.
You see what I'm saying with this, you guys? Do you see what I'm saying? But, and that's such an important job. Not only just specifically what don't worry about, but most of what goes in your brain. The brain says, get out. I don't want to mess with you right now. Leave me alone. And then the stuff that does get in, it's still a big jumbled mess. all this sensory stuff, hearing stuff, seeing stuff, smelling stuff, and that and everything else. The parietal lobe helps to assemble a meaningful picture of what this is all about. Does that make sense?
How did you say that again? Because I had understanding that the parietal lobe monitors the hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, and the functions of.
And it assembles, because all that's coming in.
Okay.
We're hearing stuff, seeing stuff, smelling stuff, dizzy, all that at the same time. And what gets past the first filter, it still is a big mess. And so the parietal lobe helps to assemble a meaningful whole out of that. Does that make sense? What does all this stuff coming in mean? How is what I'm hearing connected to what I'm looking at, connected to what I'm smelling, connected to, you see what I'm saying with that? So that that brain can have an idea of what's the situation here. For example, the occipital lobe. What is the occipital lobe? What is that for?
Seeing vision.
Vision, except, gang, this is not where vision happens. It's not even really the first step in vision. The first step, the first brain step in vision is the retina. That's part of the brain. And then, this is just one step in what becomes visual perception. It's going to take that whole brain, including that parietal lobe, to give that visual stimulus here meaning. Does that make sense? Hey, that parietal lobe, time-space orientation. That parietal lobe, a sense of depth, a sense of where all this sensory information is fitting in together. Can you imagine what would happen to that person if something interferes with that parietal lobe doing its job, like drugs? You see what I'm saying? The next thing you know, we're having wild, weird perceptions. Do you see what I'm saying with that? All that stuff, you guys. As I just said, the occipital lobe. This isn't where vision happens, though. This is where vision begins.
But the eye was where vision began.
Well, this is where visual. Thank you. I'll accept your correction. This is where visual processing actually begins.
Visual processing. Got it.
The temporal lobe. Now, don't forget, guys. What's one way that you're going to help yourself with what we're talking about today? Is you're going to go to that psychology book and read chapter 2. Is what you're going to do, right, John? That's where your brain stuff is in your intro psych book.
So that primary visual cortex, that's still connected to the occipital lobe. And what function does it?
This is the beginning of visual perception.
Okay, where visual perception begins. But the primary visual cortex, that's just
all
the
together.
whole piece.
That's all that piece.
Okay.
This red part or orange, whatever it is, right there.
And the lobe inside is what actually makes the process.
Well, we just call it the lobe. That's what we call this area.
Okay.
But this isn't where vision happens.
Right. This is where the visual
This
process.
is just one of the steps into the whole visual process. And then, gang, what's the temporal lobe usually thought of? Audio, hearing. Audio, hearing. But again, it's the same thing as with vision. This isn't where hearing happens. This is the beginning of audio perception. I mean, think about it. You hear a noise, one of the first things you got to do is think about it, remember about it, put it in time, space, put it in, you see what I'm saying? This noise is coming from that tiger, this noise is coming from that bunny rabbit. Which one do I want to pay attention to? That kind of it. You see what I'm saying with that kind of stuff? All that working, that integrated working together. Another thing about this is that the temporal lobe, also what we see, well, for most people on the left side of the brain, language, which of course is directly related to hearing. Another thing, this temporal lobe, emotional memory. This thing is tucked right under this prefrontal area and right in with that thing we keep talking about, the limbic system. Emotional memory and things like that.
So this is where a stop sign's posted. Inside there.
Well, in that
Like-
post is going,
Into it.
I have to rip this open right here and look
Right.
inside, and we're going to.
Okay.
You know, it's interesting. Vision is so incredibly complex. Audio, tactile. This is a good example of how that brain never forgets. Well, those other senses, so complex. My nose. The smell brain is so simple.
Mm-hmm.
Smell brain, one synapse from stimulus to limbic system. One, it's just one player right there. And oh, by the way, guess what else that's almost directly related to? Right down there.
So your temporal lobe also does this like smelling and the emotional?
Well, no, actually,
No.
tucked under here is what we have, a special little part of temporal and limbic. Because don't forget, as I'm talking about this, this is an artificial simpleness. Nothing does anything by itself. Everything's interconnected. Everything's always interconnected.
So with the nose going
I don't know what's right.
One
to its special place.
to which
yeah.
one synapse from stimulus to amygdala and to react. This is a good example of how that brain never forgets. Don't forget something, you guys. Long before, in the history and development of this brain, long before we even had eyes or ears, vision, hearing, long before we had skin with sensory receptors. We could go back, if we want, all the way to the primordial pool. We had better know, even as a tiny, tiny, little, simple cellular critter floating around in that primordial pool, I had better know when I'm floating too close to something that's not good for me. My chemistry and your chemistry isn't working here. I need to get away from that. Well, you talk about escape avoidance. That's been a long time, hasn't it? That was a chemical sense. I don't even have eyes. It's not that I'm looking at you. I'm not listening to you. It's not that we're bumping into each other. No. Chemical sense. The incredible importance of chemical sense from the very, very beginning, and that brain has never forgotten that, and to this very day. You know what? One synapse from smell to react. Think about this for a minute. Think about this one for a minute. I mean, we can see stuff and remember stuff. We can feel stuff. We can hear stuff. And they all can evoke memories. But what is usually the most, especially emotionally evocative sense of them all?
Smell.
Smell. To this very day. It's got that direct.
So
Think
what part
this
of the
as
brain is
President's
doing
red
that?
phone right to the emotion.
What part of the brain is doing that?
It's what's called the smell brain, which is basically a connection part between prefrontal and limbic.
Prefrontal and limbic.
Everybody may have different smell zones.
And of course,
Like you was talking about with you.
That's gonna be
different
classical
experience,
conditioning.
Because when I was riding down the street, I smelled a skunk.
Mm-hmm.
To the guy next to me talking about, that just smelled like some fire-ass weed.
Yeah, right. That's a good
That
example.
skunk weed.
and what's going to be a big impact on that? What's going to have a big impact on that?
Classical conditioning.
Classical conditioning.
Yeah, 'cause it was a skunk.
Boy, one way or another, we sneak in everything here, don't we?
He just had in his memory of that smell was affiliated with his,
And that's
with
how that's working.
his smell
And that
sensory world.
chemical reaction still exists in our body today because I was watching the study about tumors
Yeah.
and how they put off a chemical to actually draw blood vessels to it so
Right.
that it can grow.
Yeah.
So it's amazing, like the way the
Yes.
I'm weirdo.
I know, and I love it.
It's funny.
Hey, long before, I'm going to say it this way. Long before we had dirty magazines, we had pheromones.
Yes,
You
right.
like that? What's the-
Pheromones.
Pheromones are the sex hormones that attract members of our species of the opposite sex.
Everybody
Just
has
pronounce
different
certain things
pheromones.
weird.
So that's,
Yeah.
they say that's why you're like attracted to some people and not others is because of their pheromones, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Long before we were looking at dirty pictures, we had, you see what I'm saying?
You're attracted to your wife's pheromones.
That brain that never forgets, you guys. That
And
brain.
You
everybody
can
has a
actually see,
different smell.
even if it's not even a picture.
That's why we spray ourselves with
Farrah Fawcett,
pretty,
you know, from
pretty
Charlie's Angels, she was one of the most beautiful women in the world. I wouldn't want to be with her. She's just beautiful, just don't have vision.
But the point is right now, that even before we were looking at how beautiful Farrah Fawcett is, we were being that influenced by that basic chemical sense chemistry.
So like back in caveman times, two people wandering around, you don't smell good to me, so I'm not gonna, I can't, you know, but Paige smells great. You know what I mean?
hopefully somebody someday likes my smell.
How would you spell that? Farrah,
P-H-E-R-E-M-O-N-E-S.
H-E-R.
E-M-O-N-E-S.
And guys, that's an illustration, once again, how that brain never forgets the importance of chemical sense, even to this very day.
Is that why you think smelling is so simple? Because of pheromones and the way it's rooted in?
And because that brain that learned a long
Reproduction.
time ago that smelling something, or the chemical sense,
Yeah,
we didn't even have a nose in the beginning,
right.
but that
That chemical
sense
sense.
is so damn important.
Yeah.
This was the first tiger fighter. This
Yeah.
was the first tiger fighter.
Get it.
Science.
Whether you're
Sometimes
tiger-
I smell men and I'm like, you smell handsome.
You're just a chemical fool I don't like, and I gotta
There
do
was
it.
research I'll tell you about later. You probably already know.
Guys, there's another thing about the temporal lobe that catches our interest, and what is that? If we were to look at the brain from the front instead of the side, we'd see something that looks like that, wouldn't we? And what we call the two hemispheres of the brain, the left and the right, and they are connected by a band of fibers we call what? Corpus
Say it louder,
callosum.
John.
Corpus callosum. And gang, this is led to a lot of urban myth and psychology, as a matter of fact, because we got to thinking and we got to looking at. And in your book that I hope you guys are reading, because I'll tell you what, how are you going to help yourself with today's lecture? Read about it in your book. And it's going to talk to you about what? The split brain, the hemisphere, the right brain, the left brain, and all that kind of stuff. Hey, who in here? Do we have any left brainers in here?
I can't keep track of which one's which.
I'm both.
Has anybody ever, you think too much, you overanalyze
Oh,
everything?
yeah, all the time.
That kind of a thing like that?
My mom's always telling me I ruined
Hold that thought for just a second. Who are the right brainers? Who appreciates the artistic value of the situation?
Not me.
I like that too, though.
No, my mom always tells me I ruin every joke. She's like, why do you ruin every joke, Blair? And I'm like, your joke doesn't make
Play
sense.
instrument,
Give me that again.
record, and
I feel like
mix.
you're the both.
Brain.
I do both.
Left brain is the analyzer, the right brain is the appreciator.
Oversimplification. Oh, I like that.
Overanalyzer? Would you
Well,
consider it to be overanalyzing, just
Well,
analyzing?
it can be. If you're too left brain, they would have said you're overanalyzing, you think too much about stuff and things like that. The left brain is the analyzer, the right brain is the appreciator. That's a nice, simple way to put it.
Yeah, people don't like us left brainers.
But the thing is, we got to the point that we started thinking and talking like there were actually two different little brains in our head. There was the left brain and the right brain and all that. And then when you look in your book, it will talk to you about what? Split brain research. And can it be affected in certain ways and stuff like that? We got to talking though like these two brains live individual lives. They had that little telephone company called the Corpus Callosum, but that was about it. Gang, think about this for a minute. Who's a musician? You're a right brainer. Any musician worth their salt is going to know how to count, aren't they? Which is a left brain thing. There's no such thing as just right or just left with this stuff, you guys. It's going to, again, just like it's so simple to say this is where vision happens. This isn't where vision happens, and there's no such thing as everything is a whole brain thing. Everything is a whole brain thing.
So his left brain and his right brain can be working at the same time.
They gotta be working at the same time. All the time they gotta be working at the same time.
Especially when they're playing with both hands, playing bass line.
Everything, all the time, both right and left are working together at the same time.
Okay, so what about when they do that surgery for epileptics and they like cut them apart? Isn't that a thing?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So how does that impact their,
Again, you know what, this is one of those areas, what did I say? Remember when I said at the beginning of this that we're kind of like Orville and Wilbur when they were little boys sitting on the back deck watching the birds and butterflies, wondering how and why? That's one of those questions.
we don't know.
Because, you know what? You mess with that corpus callosum one way, and the next thing you know, you got dramatic effects. You mess with it, maybe just as much of a cut another way, and it's hardly noticeable. It's remember Phineas Gage? He had that camping iron. It was almost a yard long. Went through his brain, took out. It didn't just kind of bump into. It took out major parts of his frontal lobe, and somehow or another, not only did he survive it, but for the most part, I mean, Phineas Gage remained conscious after that accident. He was talking to the other railroad guys as they were carrying him off to the hospital, and things like that. How do you explain that one?
Can't your brain kind of rewire things?
Well, that's
too?
another thing. We used to think that's another one of those.
Is that not true?
That stroke was irreversible. We have discovered the brain is a lot more resilient than we used to think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have damage in certain parts of this brain, you're going to see the effects. But with proper therapy and time, sometimes things like that, my finger's actually growing back.
Gross.
And you'll see that brain rewire itself also. Now, again, if that stroke happens down here in the stay alive part of the brain, it doesn't have time to get better up here and you're dead. But no, all those kinds of things, you guys.
My dad's stroke affected the cerebellum, which is, it only happens to like 10% of the population.
Right.
But one of the biggest things was he couldn't urinate on his own afterwards.
Right.
And the doctors kept saying it'll come back with time because the brain is a powerful thing and it'll
rewire to do
Yes,
it.
and it did. And I was like, what?
But
Crazy.
why did it forget how? Because remember what did I say? Motor memory.
Mm-hmm.
You realize how many motor things have to happen just to go pee?
Yeah.
So,
And-
wait, did the parts of the brain, like, rebuild and get stronger, or does a different part of the brain step in and say, I will learn how to do that for
They're
you?
not quite sure what that is yet. We're not.
Okay.
Sometimes do we see just a regeneration, and yes, now we do see neural regeneration. Sometimes what we see, other parts of the brain start to accommodate that loss.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool, that's so neat.
Are we getting into neurons today?
Not today. We're not going to get neurons today. But guys, this outer core, this basic functional anatomy. Questions, thoughts? Other?
Love this shit. Me too.
I got an offer to anybody who wants to know a little bit more about the corpus callosum being separated. The other professor I work for has a video that I can connect you with if you want to see something about that.
Gross, put it on the Facebook page, will
You
you?
know, I was,
One second.
Copyright issues, but I can put it on a flash drive for you.
Sure.
Cool,
Put it on
cool.
a flash drive, I'll post it.
Question?
I was, I'm a forensic, file type of person, and I'm studying the criminal psychology of it. But before the lady got found guilty for Munchausen by syndrome, they were showing animation of how she was shaking the baby, and the brain was like moving, and that's what caused the baby to die. You know what I'm saying? The baby's brain hadn't formed and strengthened and moved back and
That's what
forth
that is.
by her shaking
Yeah.
baby syndrome.
Yeah, that's what that is.
And they didn't really go into details on how it actually caused the death. But they kept talking about the back part of the brain.
Probably,
But it's really
usually
the-
what causes the death is
Right.
hemorrhaging. Because while that's bouncing around like that, it's also knocking the hell out of blood vessels and stuff. And that's what causes the death.
Okay.
Mike, why do I have such horrendous name face recognition to this very day?
Because you almost died in that car accident, didn't
And
it?
what
Took off part of
happened?
your head?
When my brain hit that front and I took this injury here, it eventually splashed back and banged my symbol. See, name, face. That recognition ability was compromised. That's why I keep calling this guy Philip when his real name is Bill. Do you see?
But your brain hasn't compensated for that yet?
There are certain things the brain's
Just
not gonna,
never coming back.
It's not like it's magic.
You just never coming back.
You know, and so it's not like it's magic.
That's true.
But the new brain, this outer core, and then let's do this. Let's open this up right here, the lateral fissure, and let's start to. And this is where we're going to begin. The next time we start to talk about the brain. The limbic system.
Next time, intact.
If I sign this and take a picture, anybody buy this art?
Yeah, but I bet you can find a museum that would.
You think so?
You just have to put it in acrylic.
That looks like a book.
That right left him.
Right.
Looking like something,
Looks like-
somebody else, a dirty mind.
You are correct.
Oh, I just said butt. Jeez.
Siggy, yeah.
Nobody see it but me. I'm the only one.
The middle brain reacts with the environment, starts to modulate all that old brain behavior in a way that we start to take that first few primitive steps toward new brain interpersonal relationships. The limbic system. We're going to, this list right now, but then we're going to, when we get back together, this is where we're going. One major part of the limbic system, the amygdala, fear, trauma, aggression. We're going to talk about all this stuff, you guys. I just want to get this, I want those jumper cables to be set up for the limbic system when we get back. The amygdala, one part of the limbic system. Gang, we're going to go so deep into this stuff. Subtle areas. Well, the amygdala, and we're going to call that when we get back together the next time, sham or rage memory. Subtle areas. We're going to see many of those and how they try and modulate that initial aggression. Don't forget, the amygdala is going to be the kick in, fight or flight, kick ass responder. And then we're going to see a whole list of things that try and modulate that so that we don't have to necessarily be kicking ass all the time. We're going to see this. What does I thought we were talking about emotion here. What the hell? And write that down just in case. A very oversimplification, a gross oversimplification, but we do say it anyway. Limbic system is the seat of emotion. Limbic system, seat of emotion. What is memory? I thought we were talking about emotion. What the hell has this got to do with it then? Memory.
Because memory causes a lot of emotions.
Think about it.
Could you have emotion?
It plays a role in every. I mean, think about it. How you feel about something is going to be, to great degree, dependent on how you remember about it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Didn't we touch on that kind of last semester about how somebody, like maybe their 1 or their 2s, are based on something that happened in the past, but they don't really remember all parts of it, so then they fill in,
Sure.
which makes it worse than what it was
Sure,
to begin
sure.
with. But we can't judge that memory because we weren't there. And
The mammillary bodies. Maternal, nesting, alertness, arousal.
that part of my brain's broken.
Don't mess with mommy. Don't be messing with mommy.
But wouldn't men have this kind of, I mean...
Right, too, but I mean, you see, especially with the maternal stuff,
Okay.
You want to piss off a bear real fast? What's the best way to piss off a bear?
Whoever it's baby.
That's what they.
Get close to their babies.
You want to piss off a man, call his mama something.
The olfactory bulb. Again, one synapse from sensory to perception. And we're going to look at all these parts, gang. We're going to rip this to pieces and have all kinds of fun with this the next time we get back into this brain. I'm just kind of putting the jumper cables on this right now. Fornix, connect mammillary bodies to the hippocampus. Wow. The hypothalamus. Don't write all this down.
I
right now.
love the
I'm gonna ask you to write this
hypothalamus.
down. First of all,
It's my
where
favorite
is
part.
this also?
It is. I know. It's so ridiculous.
Where is this also? In your book, in your psychology book. We're going to look at all this. We're going to look at the interrelationship between all these things.
You actually got it in our, brain behavior.
And there's a lot of that in that brain handout. That's another thing. Thank you. Don't forget. Don't only be reading that book, but reviewing that brain handout thing I gave you. This is where we're going to start when we get together next time. You guys be well. Have a good weekend.
You do the same.